about to join Don Neuen, co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio, and Denise Simon, host of the Denise Simon Experience, for a weekly situation report, or SITREP. 18 hours a day, Denise Simon lives her life as an Intel Analyst. 18 hours a day, Don Neuen lives his life in the world of rock and roll. 1 hour each day, Neuen receives a daily SITREP from Simon. Welcome to the Drive Time Situation Report. Fasten your seatbelt. You're now in Don Neuen's car, and he is calling in for his SITREP.
Smello.
What's up, Denise Simon? How you doing, girl?
Don Neuen. How you doing?
That's right, it is indeed. Hey, we got some major storms blowing through Atlanta. Major. So if I end up going down here on this drive time sit rep, it's because the cell tower's taking a hit and I've lost the signal. And it sounds like your cell phone's ringing. Sounds like somebody didn't mute her cell phone, Denise Simon.
Well, that's actually my
Yeah.
iPad.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, sounds like your iPad wasn't muted. Ladies and gentlemen, while Denise Simon is muting all of her various accoutrements there, please allow me to welcome you to tonight's Drive Time Situation Report with the ever-stellar Denise Simon and her loud cellular products, and myself, Don Neuen. I am coming to you from my vehicle, driving home after a long and grueling day at the office, and I have called into my wonderful and faithful situation report intelligence analyst, Denise Simon. Now, for those of you that are new to the show, I kind of want to explain what's going on here. Most of the time throughout the week, I'll call Denise on my drive home from work. She has spent all day sifting through information, reading articles, watching hearings. So by the time I call her at night, she's got a full recap for me. And she brings me up to speed. And I am forever grateful for that. Because throughout the day, I don't have the time to do any of this stuff. I'm working all day long like most of you guys. And I don't have the time to read articles, check Drudge, see what's going on in the headlines or anything else. So I count on, and I don't take 1 second of Denise Simon's time for granted. I appreciate every moment of it because she brings me up to speed because quite frankly, Denise, I haven't checked out any news. I don't think I really had time yesterday. So it's been a couple of days since I've been able to catch up on things. So the pressure's really on you tonight to bring me up to speed. So, yeah. So do me a favor. We're going to timestamp the show, ladies and gentlemen. We do this every week. So you know when this situation report has taken place. So without any further ado, Denise, what is, let's timestamp it and get after it.
It's 9:26 p.m. on the 7th. Gosh, it's already August in the year of our Lord, 2018.
Excellent. That was so much more serious than you usually do it. With the little, pause there to talk about the fact that it's already August, but it was very much more. Hey, before we get started on this, the last time we had a SITREP show, which was last week, we were talking about defining your skin color and relating it to some Crayola crayon. Now, I haven't seen you in quite some time, so I'm having to base this on my memory and then making adjustments for the amount of time that is passed since I saw you and trying to calculate out how much time you would expose your skin to the Florida sun. So I'm going to come up with a color of your skin tone, because remember last week, ladies and gentlemen, we were talking about this ad nauseum. And Denise, I'm going to say that you might be a saddle brown at this point. Am I close?
No, not particularly, and I'll tell you why. We are in probably our 37th or 38th day of some kind of cloud cover and days that have had 3 to 4 storms a day. I've had 2 already today. I bet you in the last month we've had 25 inches of rain. I mean, it's amazing. So
all right, so you would not consider your skin tone, because ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that missed last week's show, first of all, shame on you. But secondly, for those of you that did miss the show, we were comparing Denise's skin tone to that of minority people, or, you know, people that may have been crossing the border illegally from, say, Mexico or South America or the Middle East. And we were trying to determine, correct me if I'm wrong, Denise, whether you should actually be classified as a brown-skinned person.
Don, really?
Yeah. Hey, you know, I'm gonna stick with saddle brown.
All right, you do what you want.
Without maybe the use of a lot of neat's foot oil to darken it. So kind of a light saddle brown.
Okay.
Is that safe?
Whatever. Sure. Whatever you want.
There you go. See, you have to understand how to deal with my stupidity. All right? After all of these years, all you have to do is agree, and I'll move on to something else.
Yeah, most of the time, I just try and step over it.
I know, but see, if you try to step over it, then I'm thinking you either didn't hear me, didn't comprehend it, or are ignoring me. And if you ignore me, then I'm just going to try that much harder.
Yeah.
So the safest thing for you to do...
Is that a character flaw?
No, not at all. Not at all. And how dare you to accuse me of that? But here's the deal. All you have to do is, and, you know, Donna has perfected this. You just have to go, that's great. And then I'll move on.
Okay.
All right, so just try.
That's great.
All right, see, there you go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get after it. Denise Simon, what in the hell is going on?
Well, the big news of the day, of course, is the Rick Gates being the witness du jour in the Manafort case. And this is getting to be really quite interesting. I would say in some cases, the conservative media, I would say maybe like a Sean Hannity, are stepping over some other kinds of facts here. But anyway, the judge, I think, is certainly doing his best to give Manafort as many breaks as he can. But I think he's going to, because the defense is still, they may have rested today, I'm not sure. But Gates has clearly gotten some kind of a deal. We don't know what that deal is, but his testimony so far has been interestingly damning to Manafort. What came up today is the fact that, remember, there were some bank frauds and some loans that we heard about, and Hannity will tell you that it goes back to 2005. Not quite. Some of these things are actually much more recent. And we have a fellow by the name of Steve Calk, C-A-L-K. And he was a former helicopter pilot that operates in Chicago. He bought himself a bank out of Kansas that was not doing terribly well, renamed the bank, and then how you move a bank from Kansas to Illinois, I don't know. But anyway, the long story shorter is that this Steve fella was doing some pretty interesting things, and that is he was giving a lot of mortgage loans or mortgages, granting a lot of mortgages that were all backed up by the VA. And so his exposure on paper really was almost next to nothing because of the VA. But the other interesting thing here is that he also, this Steve character, ingratiated himself with Rahm Emanuel, because somehow there were some city government subsidies going to this bank. What all that means, I'm not quite sure. Some of this is above my pay grade. But then this bank ended up moving some of the business into New York, and he became familiar with Paul Manafort, gave Manafort 2 mortgages, it appears, of which the documentation in order to get those mortgages was false. And after Manafort left the Trump campaign, if you will, because remember, he produced and directed the Republican National Convention. Rick Gates, and he and Rick Gates were still partners. Rick Gates stayed on with the campaign and became part of the what I would call the inauguration committee. Manafort moved on to something else, whatever that something else is. I'm not quite sure I can define. But at one point, Manafort sends Rick Gates an email that says, "Hey, let's see what we can do. There's a position that could become open for Secretary of the Army, and I think that we should nominate or put Steve Koch's name in there." So this is a whole lot more recent now than 2005. See where I'm going?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you and I have always agreed that Manafort is a bad egg, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right. The one thing that I appreciate about Judge Ellis is that he's trying to keep the line drawn between the nefarious bad actions of one Paul Manafort and the at least illusion or appearance of the Mueller prosecutorial team trying to suck Donald Trump into Paul Manafort's bad little orbit.
Well, he was there. I mean, he was there. But as far as this conspiracy / collusion thing, it just doesn't appear to be there. Now, if we go back to Mueller's original mandate, I think what Mueller was doing was looking at all kinds of communications and evidence and so forth, and then all of a sudden he sees some of these emails. And these emails do touch the Trump orbit, but it doesn't, obviously this Steve Koch cat wasn't, on the short list to become Secretary of the Army.
Right.
But,
and hold on, Denise. I also think that it's important, based on everything you've just said, that we understand that Manafort was consistently in Trump's orbit. Trump was not necessarily in Manafort's orbit. And to me, there's a big difference in that. And I'm not trying to find some stretch that'll exonerate Trump from this. If Trump has done something wrong, he needs to pay the price for it.
I agree. But he was in the Trump Tower meeting too. So,
Yeah, but I would tend to say that Trump was a hell of a lot more important for Manafort to be hanging around with than Manafort was for Trump to be hanging around with.
I guess the big question is, and there's a couple of things here, and we just don't, clearly there's connective tissue there. We don't know the depth of that connective tissue. But I would say this: how did Manafort even come up to the Trump radar such that he was put in such a dramatic role to produce and direct the Republican National Convention and the invitations? Because interestingly enough, there was yet another email that Manafort had sent to Rick Gates being on the inaugural committee, to make sure that Rick Gates sent 2 invitations to attend the inauguration of Trump to Steve Koch and Steve Koch Jr. So he was still necessarily trying to push that, it appears. But how did Manafort even come into the Trump circle? And how did J.D. Gordon come into the Trump circle? or George Papadopoulos or, any of these other people. We don't understand those things. And so I just don't believe that Trump had the right people that were looking into the resumes and the backgrounds of some of the people that he had on his team.
I would most certainly agree with that. So, where have things gone in the past 2 days? I mean, if you were to do a recap here of this Manafort trial, where are things at right now?
Well, now defense comes up next. So, I mean, we're only what I would say to necessarily be halfway through. But given what was learned today, I would say that we need to not be quite as critical and hateful of what the Mueller operation is doing. He clearly had evidence and materials that would raise some eyebrows.
Yeah, I know what you're trying to do there, and I am not convinced yet, and you and I disagree on this, that this whole Mueller investigation team is not chock full of nefarious characters.
I didn't say that. I did not say that.
Definitely.
I did not say that they were. I wouldn't go so far as to say that they're nefarious, but I did not say that they weren't certainly part of a massive bias operation. However,
Andrew Weitzman is nefarious.
Okay, but I wouldn't put them all into that realm. They all may be. I don't know them all. But I would say that we're clearly beginning to see some evidence on, and again, I didn't make it dramatic. I just said raise some eyebrows. But having said that, we have the defense coming up now, and I would say this might be rather interesting. I mean, none of this, of course, is televised. We have to go according to reports that are coming to us by members of the press that are sitting in that courtroom.
Mm-hmm. And why is this not televised?
I don't know that I can answer that question.
Well, I can. I can tell you what I think. I think that the Department of Justice and the FBI and Mueller don't want this to be televised, because if they get slapped around much more like they have been with Ellis slapping them around, they don't want the public seeing that any more than they have to.
I know that.
Think about it. If OJ's trial consumed television as much as it did for something that was nowhere near as serious as this is, don't you think the public ought to be able to watch this and make their own decisions about it?
I think in some cases, as a result of the OJ trial, is the reason that you don't necessarily have cameras in a courtroom.
I don't know. I thought Cato Caitlin was pretty damn impressive.
I can't think of any recent cases where cameras have been in a courtroom. Have you?
I'm not the one that gets to sit and watch all this all day long, so no, I don't know.
Okay, I can't think of any significant cases where cameras have been in a courtroom in the last, 8 or 10 years.
Okay. All right, fair enough. All right, so we got about 5 minutes here before we have to go to that bottom of the hour break that we're required to do now, much to my dismay. How about you, Denise? I enjoy continuing on without the break.
Well, that's the radio business, isn't it?
Yeah, people in hell want ice water. I guess that's the analogy that I'll use with my feelings toward going to break at the bottom of the hour for the SITREP. Give me a 5 minutes nugget of something here.
Well, we're still in the back and forth on whether Trump will give testimony or go to a question and answer session with the Mueller team. Pretty much, from what I can tell, every one of his lawyers, from Jay Sekulow to Rudy Giuliani, are saying no. Trump is saying,
what do you think he should do?
I wouldn't do it either.
Neither would I.
And I guess the bigger reason is that Trump steps all over himself. I mean, he has to do too many. He's just not eloquent, and he's not a wordsmith. He's not cautious. So if you want to, now we're down to, selecting questions and reducing the number of questions and those kinds of things. And now there's chatter on where Trump would give written responses where they can be carefully measured and guided as opposed to oral responses.
Do you think he should give written responses?
Well, he would do that certainly with a team of lawyers around him. But, if that is a method by which some of this nonsense goes away, then fine. Because he wouldn't really be the one doing those responses. The team of lawyers would be. Right.
Yeah, I'm about ready for this to all go away too. How about you?
Well, I really am. And I can tell that the conservative media too is getting quite frustrated with some of Trump's tweets because he ends up adding more gasoline to the fire. It's like he's constantly picking fights. He's not only fighting back, but he's also picking fights. And of course, then if that's the case, then all media is going to stay on top of this. I really would much rather be talking about other meaningful things other than California's water. They don't have enough to fight these fires, and the water's going into the Pacific Ocean. That's not exactly true. So, I get it. All right.
Hey, before we go to break, ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you where you can go to follow all of Denise Simon's great work. She has her own website. The website is founderscode.com. Founders with an S. Founderscode.com. The one thing about Denise Simon's website is that you can put stock in the fact that it is full of integrity and that all of her posts are well vetted and they're written in a way that you are able to sift through them and share them and like them and quote from them and discuss them with complete integrity among your friends and your peers and maybe some of those that are on the other side of the aisle that you're debating. If you put your email address in the little box, I think it's on the right side of her website, you will receive on a daily basis in your email inbox notifications of her most recent articles that she's written. That way you're able to save them and refer back to them and read them at your leisure if you too are too busy in the day to be able to read all of her work as she pops them up. But on average, she's putting any place from 3 to 6 articles up a day. So there's plenty of information that she's talking about. The list of topics is very wide range, and she does her best to, like I said, crank out about 3 to 6 of these a day. And that website, again, is founderscode.com. We have to go to this dreaded bottom of the hour break that we've been talking about. So we're going to be back in about 3 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, stick with us. You're listening to the Drive Time Situation Report with Denise Simon, and my name is Don Neuen. We'll be right back.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.
Hi, thank you for listening. My name is Ron Phillips, and I'm the owner and operations manager of Talk America Radio. It is with great pride that I offer you this 24/7 stream of some of the finest talk radio programming in the country, but I need your support. We are a listener-supported network. That means we need your help to continue to offer the quality programming you're hearing right now. If you're able, please visit talkamericaradio.us and click the Support Us button. Your donation will go a long way in helping us continue to share the American voice. Thank you.
This is Denise Simon, host of the Denise Simon Experience. When I'm not debating with Donna Fiducia about politics, I listen to Cowboy Logic Radio. Why, you ask? Because outside of my blog, founderscode.com, and my own radio show, the Denise Simon Experience, Cowboy Logic is by far the most entertaining and informative radio show on planet Earth. Plus, Don makes me feel guilty if I don't listen to his radio show every week.
Hi, this is Donna Fiducia, co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio. For 28 years, I was in the mainstream media, most recently as an anchor at the Fox News Channel. No more. Ladies and gentlemen, the mainstream media has completely failed the American people. Radio networks like Talk America Radio will not fail you. Radio shows like Cowboy Logic Radio will not fail you. Check out the entire roster of over 60 weekly radio shows by visiting talkamericaradio.us. That's talkamericaradio.us.
TalkAmericaRadio.us.
This is Denise Simon. 18 hours a day, I live in a world as an intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. What I find is reprehensible. What I find is terrifying. What I find is treasonous. 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 The mainstream media has completely failed the American people. 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 Join me for the Denise Simon Experience every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Don Neuen. I am the co-host of Cowboy Logic Radio. You can listen to my show on Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And you've got on the other end of this conversation, the other end of this drive time situation report, the great Denise Simon. She hosts her own show as well that airs Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, and the name of that show is the Denise Simon Experience. Now, Denise, I am passing through the lovely town of Douglasville, Georgia. You can probably hear the background noise on Interstate 20 as I'm careening down the highway at a brisk 72 miles an hour. The reason you hear the noise, background noise, more here than you do other places is because they haven't figured out in Douglas County how to apply asphalt that's quieter than what I'm driving on. What say you about that?
Well, yeah, I've been on that road before.
I mean, can you hear the noise behind me?
A little bit.
Yeah. I'm trying to muffle it as best I can. But at any rate, ladies and gentlemen, I am coming to you from my own personal vehicle. I'm leaving at about 9. I guess we started this about 9:30 tonight. And I'm driving home 67 miles to my house. And this is when I get to catch up with my buddy Denise Simon and find out what the hell went on in the world today. So, Denise, before we went to break, that dadgum bottom of the hour break that I don't like very much, there was something I wanted to ask you, and I can't remember what it was or even what it had. Oh, Charlie Kirk. Did you see that our buddy Charlie Kirk was harassed in, where the hell was he? Philly or Maryland or someplace?
Philadelphia, in a coffee shop.
Yeah. What the hell's going on with that, man? Charlie Kirk, I mean, you and I met Charlie Kirk. The first time we met him, he was still wearing pull-up pants. Do you remember that?
Well, I actually hung with him for about 3 to 4 days back in Tampa when he was really kind of getting started, and I was also with his benefactor / mentor. I'm trying to remember his first name. His last name is Montgomery. When the Republican National Convention was in Tampa. So we shared a table in the lobby of a hotel for like 3 or 4 days reporting on the RNC. So I've known Charlie before Turning Point USA was really Turning Point USA.
Now, did that take place before you and Donna and I met him in
Yes.
South Carolina?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
so
yes.
you knew him
Yes.
when we ran into him in South Carolina.
Yes.
I was wondering why when you guys met, you spanked each other on the butts. I couldn't put that together, but now it makes sense. All right, so come on, that was a football analogy. Since you're the only one of us two that is still watching football. It was a football analogy.
It was.
Yeah, you like that? They don't do that in tennis, do they?
And actually,
Y'all
no.
smack rackets together and stuff like that, right?
And speaking of that, I was very, very happy to see Coach Kennedy, the one that was fired by the school system out there in Washington for praying on the 50-yard line, who was the football coach for a 2A high school, that he has got himself a new friend, and that is the former Florida State coach, Bobby Bowden. Bobby Bowden.
Is he going to start coaching at a college level?
No. But I will say that Bobby Bowden, bless him for stepping up and standing on the side of Coach Kennedy. Coach Kennedy very much wants to go back to coaching, but he is probably just as much flattered by the words and the thinking of Coach Kennedy. And so it was very gratifying to see, not once but twice today on TV. So speaking of football, I want to give a big hat tip to Coach Bobby Bowden for supporting Coach Joe Kennedy.
I can't agree with you more, and maybe Coach Kennedy will get a job at a rival school and be able to go back and kick the pants out of that team that fired him, huh?
Maybe so. Who knows? That
would be great. All right, so hey, explain what all do you know about what happened with our buddy Charlie Kirk and them throwing stuff on him and just the absolute disgusting display of these Antifa pukes? What can you tell me?
Well, they were in I would say a very nice kind of coffee shop, and some Antifa types decided to go in and make their visit to the coffee shop miserable, to the point where the owner of the coffee shop pretty much said, hey, something's got to happen here. So Charlie and I forget the girl's name, they very nicely just said, fine, they paid their bill, no big deal. They went outside and things got worse. To the point where the Antifa types were using the bullhorns and screaming in their faces and blowing whistles in their ears. And then at one point, one of the Antifa guys threw a drink. Actually, I think it was just more of a bottle of water on Charlie Kirk, which is really assault, by the way, by the definition of assault. But Charlie...
let me ask you this. You think Charlie is going to sue the pants off that guy?
He is not. He said he was not. They would just kind of let it go. But another interesting thing happened today, and I do not know all the details, but apparently some Antifa types did something I would say even perhaps a little bit worse, and that is where a police officer apparently over the weekend was getting married, and they went in and busted up the wedding.
Not cool.
No.
Let me ask you something, Denise. If these Antifa pukes end up harming someone physically, hurting someone, or God forbid, killing someone, at that point, is Maxine Waters subject for potential liability?
I don't know anything. I don't know anything about that kind of law, but I would say this: right or wrong, when little Miss Janet Napolitano was the secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, and she immediately came out in her early tenure at DHS under the Obama administration, she released quite the list of what she would necessarily have defined as domestic enemies. And nobody in the media or anybody else really complained. The conservatives complained, but to no end, and to no recourse. So given where we are today, because Antifa over the weekend also attacked a Marine Corps recruiting office in Berkeley and broke windows and, that kind of thing. So I think it's about time that we list them as a domestic terror group, because it's really what they are. I mean,
Could not agree with you more.
There are physical confrontations here, and there is damage to property, including government property.
Hey, let me ask you about that Marine Corps recruiting station that was damaged by Antifa. Were there by any chance any Marines there when they did that?
No, when this is the other.
Of course not.
Well, but this is the interesting thing. When there is word on the streets that Antifa is going to do what Antifa does, businesses are asked to close and lock up and get out by local law enforcement. And that's what the Marine.
Did that happen in Berkeley?
Yep.
It did happen this past weekend?
Yep.
Okay. Because I'm going to tell you something. I think that if these Antifa pukes would have approached a Marine recruiting station when Marines were there, the outcome may have been different. And as the daughter of a Marine, I would assume you'd agree with me on that.
I would.
Exactly. All right, what's next?
Well, I want to talk about spying and espionage, because I find it remarkable here in the last couple of days. There's this big brouhaha where Dianne Feinstein had a Chinese operative that was working for her in San Francisco as her driver/office manager of her Senate office in San Francisco for many years.
20 years.
Yeah,
20 years.
And I was going to say that. And about 5 years ago, the FBI went to her and said, "Hey, Miss Senator lady, you've got a Chinese spy working for you, who, by the way, is not Chinese, interestingly enough. His name is Russell Lowe. And Russell Lowe was part of a Chinese political organization where he was feeding back political information back to this organization, which then fed it back to the Republic of China."
How do you spell his last name? Lowe or Lo?
Lowe.
Mm-hmm.
And so she claims that she was absolutely shocked and fired him immediately. Well, the damage has really been done. I mean, this is 20 years, and had complete access to emails, went to parties, went to meetings, overheard her conversations, delivered mail, delivered communications, attended, I would say diplomatic events. And so, she's downplaying this whole thing. At no time did this Mr. Lowe have security clearance. Well, in my opinion, he wouldn't have needed it.
Yeah. Exactly. Hey, so let me ask you this to kind of let me understand the timeline of this. She fired him 5 years ago when she was notified by the FBI?
Yes.
All right. Why is this just surfacing? Did she cover this up?
Pretty much. And it's kind of remarkable because I wrote about it almost 2 weeks ago myself. And it's kind of fascinating that it's kind of showing up in headlines today, but nonetheless, it's out there. And
all right, well, hold on. That's very important what you just said. You wrote about this 2 weeks ago. It shows up in Drudge, I think, yesterday. Mm-hmm. Ladies and gentlemen, founderscode.com. I don't know how much more clear I can be about that. Back to you, Denise.
Well, thank you. I did not have his name at the time, but about a week ago, I did get a hold of his name. And so let's just understand Dianne Feinstein and her husband, Mr. Bloom, and his relationships with, you use the word nefarious, people of China. And how is that any different than where we are today with all things Trump and Russia? But let's go back a little bit further, because this is another one that got completely swept under the rug. And I remember this very distinctly because I have several friends that are former CIA, and we've kind of discussed this, that under the Obama administration, the CIA was very concerned that they had a lot of operatives that were working in China. They were Chinese, and they were working on behalf of the CIA, because that's what the CIA does. Everybody spies. But all of a sudden, there was this rash of these people that had gone missing. And so the CIA was very concerned that they had a somewhat of a scandal that was going on, that their paid operatives in China were either one going missing or two ending up dead. Well, the big reason is because we had yet another Chinese spy that was operating here in the United States that got access to that list of names and reported it back to the Chinese, and the Chinese just killed him. Okay, so we had that little scandal that happened, when that happened, and it got to, I guess, Obama in a presidential daily briefing, he told the CIA, terminate all relationships. So we pulled essentially all of our espionage spy operations out of China in the mid term of Obama's reign at the White House. But then we had another fun thing.
Hold on. Before you move into that next thing, I gotta make sure I understood an analogy that you used a moment ago, and I'm hoping I misunderstood it. You parlayed off of Dianne Feinstein and her Chinese operative spy that was in her orbit for 20 years in a comparison to the alleged Russian involvement in the Trump orbit.
Mm-hmm.
You did do that?
Well, what I'm trying to say here is that everybody is trying to marry Natalia Veselnitskaya, the little Russian operative that met in Trump Tower, and how this meeting in Trump Tower was the worst thing that's ever happened. And Trump is he's operating with Russian operatives, and in these meetings and these communications, and they were invited here and they do this, and then you had Lavrov and Ambassador Kislyak in the White House, and blah, 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 blah. Well, I don't think Trump was really trying to hide any of that. I don't know about, the Trump Tower meeting particularly, and on how those really truly unfolded. I mean, we know what we're told by media, but somehow I just don't think that there is an equivalence to how bad things were possibly for 20 years in the Dianne Feinstein orbit.
All right, thank you for qualifying that, because I did misinterpret what you said, and I was going to come back rather swiftly with there's a big damn difference between what they're accusing Trump of, given the fact that he was not a sitting senator for 20 years having this go on.
And sitting on the Senate Intelligence Committee.
Exactly. All right, so thank you for making me feel much better about that. Please continue.
So then we had this other woman, a Russian, who was actually recruited, I guess, and vetted by the United States Secret Service. Why, I don't know. But she was placed into our Russian embassy in Moscow. She had been operating there for 10 years. And it suddenly became known, interestingly enough, that she was having way too many meetings with other Russian operatives, and she had all kinds of access, much more so than Mr. Russell Lowe of Senator Feinstein fame. And so the Secret Service was just a little on the embarrassed side. They didn't know what to do, but when they found out how bad things were there, because she'd been operating there for about 10 years, they pulled her security clearance and then essentially fired her. But when did they fire her? They didn't fire her until, because this is how we sweep things under the rug, they didn't fire her until Trump in 2016 got rid of the 60 some odd diplomats here in the United States, and then Putin decided to respond in kind, and then he expelled some number of them too. And so in all of that movement, they got rid of her. Now, isn't that just a little on the scary side that we were so stupid and so lax that we've got a Russian operative working in our embassy?
Yeah, well, let's be clear. We were not stupid and lax. We weren't.
Okay.
Now, were we?
Well, Obama's Secret Service was.
There you go. There you go.
And they were the ones that, if we remember, Cartagena.
Where is Rob Lowe now? Has he?
He's working in some. No, he wasn't. He is working at some kind of human rights non-government organization in San Francisco.
Okay. And why is he not in prison?
Why would he be?
He was a spy.
Well, I guess Dianne Feinstein wields a lot of power now, doesn't she?
Are you alluding to the fact that Dianne Feinstein basically granted this guy immunity or made it to where there was no charges that were pressed against him?
Yeah. And let me go a little bit further on that. Because
and why didn't the DOJ step over that crap?
Who's DOJ? You mean Obama's DOJ?
No. What's the statute of limitations on?
I have no idea.
A foreign spy.
Have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
But let's understand something. When it comes to Silicon Valley, when it comes to San Francisco, when it comes to the West Coast, Seattle,
lawlessness.
Well, it is absolutely teeming with Chinese and Russian spies. And so let me, and this is coming from those in the FBI that follow this and track these people. They have case files, and I guess they're very selective at the Department of Justice when the case files are turned over to the Justice Department, who they go after and who they don't go after. But one of the particular areas in Dianne Feinstein's real estate area of authority out there is an area called Presidio. And Presidio used to be a former military base in the United States and right at the base, I think, of the Golden Gate Bridge. But it has now been turned into a very, very fancy park. And it's also a very exclusive, very, very exclusive residential area, highly gated. And there are a bunch of foreign, I would say, nefarious people living there. And so little Miss Dianne Feinstein ensures that she protects anybody in the Presidio. Why is this a problem? Well, I'll read something to you just to kind of give you a for instance that Chinese espionage operations have targeted a number of Silicon Valley-based technology giants. During a number of attacks, 2 former intelligence officers explained that Chinese intelligence seek files and continue to seek files on U.S. companies' legal counsel or other legal documentation, including access to Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act warrants or national security letters that were issued. In other words, very, very important and a top priority for Chinese intelligence and their interest was finding out the extent to which U.S. officials have knowledge about China's own intelligence operatives in the United States, particularly, I would say, in Silicon Valley / Presidio. So, now the Russians operate there too. Now, let's also remember that under Donald Trump, when we expelled some Russian operatives, when he did, and even Obama, that they talked about those that we expelled out of New York and Maryland. Well, we also expelled some out of San Francisco. San Francisco is a very, very known hub for Russian and Chinese operatives. Now, let's go a little bit further, shall we? Because today there was a press gaggle. And this press gaggle was with Secretary of Defense Mattis. And one of the journalists happened to ask Mattis, and I quote, "Mr. Secretary, you stated that you are watching submarines in the North Atlantic and elsewhere, but are Russia and China putting more submarines out to look at the United States than they have since the Cold War?" Secretary Mattis's response was, "Yes, we always keep an eye on the submarines at sea, and I'd prefer not to say any more on that. Thanks." So decided to go a little bit further on that. Why would these journalists, what is it they possibly could know? And that has Secretary Mattis somewhat a little rattled because he didn't want to go any further in his explanation. Well, we have Russian subs that have been snooping around Northern Europe, up around the Finland area, Sweden area, North Atlantic, and our East Coast. What are they doing? Well, glad you asked. They are snooping around our underseas telecommunications cables that are used by NATO. Now, these Russian submarines are equipped, interestingly enough, with anti-submarine missiles. And so we activated last year, and I remember this, we reactivated what is known, I think, as the Second Fleet, that had been somewhat mothballed under the Obama administration, so we could patrol these areas. And we are, in fact, patrolling them with manned and unmanned surface ships, attack submarines, air surveillance, the P-8 Poseidon, and sub-hunting warplanes. We have, this year, we are launching something called a submarine called the USS South Dakota. And the USS South Dakota is the most advanced technologically stealth sub we have in the system. And we are apparently, because the Pentagon got a whole bunch of spending money, thanks to Donald Trump, we are putting a bunch of them out there. But the USS South Dakota is the first one.
Hold that thought. We got 20 seconds left.
Oh.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have to tune in next week. Denise, make a note, if you don't mind, in your notes to try and pick up on this topic for the next week's Drive Time SITREP. Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Don Neuen, and on behalf of the stellar Denise Simon, I think you will all agree that she has done a fabulous job tonight providing you and me with a Drive Time situation report. We want to say goodnight. Denise, I'm going to have to close it out because we are out of time. Ladies and gentlemen, join us next week, Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. And in the meantime, have a great week, and God bless America.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.